Hi everybody, Corey here with Team Kramer Fishing, and this video is going to be a review of the Coleman Weathermaster 6-person screened-in tent. Unlike a lot of the other reviews I've seen of people who have just bought their tent and are posting reviews of them, we've actually had this tent for 5 or 6 years and it's seen lots of regular use. Our channel is a family camping and fishing channel, so we've been through this tent in all sorts of weather. We just got back from a weekend of camping in which it was really rainy and I needed to set the tent up to air it out a little bit and clean it up a little bit in the backyard, and I thought, hey, you know, who better to review this tent than us? So let's take a look at the tent and I'll tell you over the years what I view as the pros and the cons of the tent. Okay, so let's start with something pretty simple, and that's the price. This runs for about 200 bucks on Amazon. I'll say right away that I think $200 is a fair price for the tent. The list price is $300. That's probably a little on the high side. Right around 200 bucks is definitely a fair deal for this tent. We typically take this tent when we're car camping. It weighs about 40 pounds when it's all packed up, which is definitely one of the negatives, and it takes a lot of room up in your car or SUV or wherever you're putting it, and it's generally pretty hard to lug around, especially if it gets wet. Now, the flip side of that weight is this tent does really well in the weather. I mean, we've been through countless storms in the tent. It hardly ever gets any water in it unless we've tracked it in, or unless, you know, there's some reason for it. There might be a small leak here and there around the door. It's pretty normal with tents. I do treat the top of the rain fly every year, every other year, you know, with a standard kind of sealer that you spray on. Usually I get the one that has the orange cap at Walmart. That seems to work the best. So it does have a little bit of treatment on it. But we got 3 inches of rain this last camp out, and the only water we got in was a small drip by the door. So one of the nice things about this tent, we have a family of 4, and it's pretty big inside. So let's take a look inside, because that's usually one of the main things that you care about when you're looking for a tent. I don't have it totally staked down here, so I might have to, give me just a second. Okay, I didn't have it totally staked down, so I needed to grab the bottom to open it, but if you have a stake down there, you can open everything with one hand. So inside, it's 9 feet by 11 feet, which is enough to put, if you use air mattresses, it's enough to put 2 queen-size air mattresses. We use cots, and I think this tent in particular, if you use a relatively tall cot, ours sit like at least a foot off the ground. I think this tent is especially good if you're using 4 cots, because we can fit 4 full-size adult-size cots in here, and there's not very much room to move around. I mean, you'll get like a foot along this edge by the screen, and you'll get maybe a couple feet or a foot and a half along this edge, and then the rest is all taken up with cots. But the great thing about that is you can stuff all your bags and everything under the cots. So since this tent is so tall, I'm 6 feet tall, stand up in the middle. I can stand up almost all the way over to the sides, really, too. So if your cots are over here and I'm crammed up over here, I still can stand up and put my clothes on or whatever, do what I need to do. I can still actually walk around. And if it's raining out and you're stuck in your tent with your family, having a little extra room to move around and not being stuck in a little dome tent is pretty nice. The other thing is, this thing is incredibly stable. Once you get it all staked down and you get all the guy wires down and the rain fly on, it doesn't move very much in the wind. I mean, you feel pretty safe in this tent. The poles that go across the top are like real thick aluminum poles. I can show you on the outside here in just a minute. So yeah, 2 air mattresses will fit great in here, or 4 cots. For a family of 4, it's about perfect, and it gives you a little bit of room to move around. If you have the cots, it's better, because if you're like us, we have tons of gear, and it gives you a place to put the gear out of the way and out of potentially the water. if you're camping with us, you're probably going to be getting wet because it always rains. But now the screened-in porch. So first, one of the reasons we got this is because it had a screened-in porch. It's good for sitting out of the sun. We can fit 2 adult-sized director's chairs in here and then 2 kid-sized. And that's what we usually take. You could fit 4 adult-sized ones in if you had to. Now, in terms of staying out of the sun, it works wonderful. In terms of staying out of the rain, you're going to get wet out here. It's not particularly dry unless it's just drizzling. Now, the one modification I eventually made to this tent, and you could see that the screen kind of slants outwards, so you can imagine just in your head, if it's raining, it's blowing even a little bit, it's gonna pretty much get everything wet except for maybe right in front of the door, which is still nice to take your shoes off and stuff. Get some of your junk. If you have a cooler, you can pull it in. It's not just sitting out. And you can kind of stow some of your stuff in here. It works as a little bit of a privacy, you know, if you're in a campground, to keep things stowed away. But one thing I did do is, I don't have them up here now. I bought like a cheap tarp from Walmart, and I cut out sections to fit each one of these screens, and then I just clip it up with some clips. And for, you know, the clips are more expensive than the tarp, but let's say for 30 bucks, you can design and make your own, with a pair of scissors and some clips and a tarp, your own kind of extra rain shield on this. And if you do that, this really works wonderful in the rain, because sometimes it rains all day long when you're camping, and we're just not the type of campers that go home. We always wait it out. So even if it looks like it's going to be crummy. So having those tarps basically, you know, adds another 50% of your living space. And in that case, we can sit out here and play cards, have our chairs in here. You can cook. You can do, it really opens it up if it's rainy outside. And you can basically do everything inside this little kind of patio area. So that's a big, big plus. If you make that one modification, it adds a lot to this tent, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And what I do is, that stuff is just in a separate bag, and if I see that it's going to be really rainy the whole time we're gone, I'll throw it in. And if it's going to be beautiful and sunny, I just leave that bag at home, and I don't even take it. So inside the porch is not waterproof by any means, but inside the tent stays pretty waterproof. So moving along, you'll see it uses these big, thick aluminum poles. Now, the poles are great; they work wonderful, but one of the kind of annoying things is these little buttons here. You have to push them in really far to break these poles down when you take it down. And if they get a little corroded or whatever after time, it can be pretty hard to push them in as far as you need to, because you almost have to have like a thumbnail or something. A lot of times we'll take a tent stake and push it in as far as you need to. So that can be a little annoying when you're breaking down the tent to go. So one of the other downsides is, I just set this tent up by myself here today because my wife's at work, but it takes a long time to set this tent up. It has a lot of components to it compared to like a big dome tent. It has, I'll show you the door here in a minute, but I mean, it has these extra poles that go across. It has the metal poles that go up, clips everywhere, Velcro. I don't have these on right now because I'm just drying it out, but it just takes a long time to set up. But once you get it set up, it's pretty solid. I mean, it would take a really huge wind to knock this thing down. So it's a trade-off. I mean, sometimes you're traveling and you have a storm chasing you and you want to get your stuff set up before the rain hits. You might not have enough time to do it with this tent, you know. So you got to set aside a little bit of time to get the tent set up properly. Now, one of the things I love about this tent is this door. I'm not sure who designed this door for Coleman, but they did an excellent job. So it can zip. I have it unzipped right now. You can see. You can zip it all the way down like a normal side door, okay, and that goes all the way down. So it's completely sealed shut. But you can also just attach it with these little Velcro patches. So just like that, and there's a couple other ones around. And it has this handle here, and you pull it, and then it opens like a regular door, like almost like a house door or whatever. So that it has some poles that run. It has one pole that runs along this edge all the way down to the bottom, and then it has another one that runs here, and it gives it some structure so it's not all floppy. And it's really great for going in and out of the tent when you're having to load stuff in. You know, you imagine if there's You know, we live in Iowa, usually there's mosquitoes everywhere, and stuff like that. When you're going in and out of your tent a lot, you know, unzipping and zipping your door is kind of a major annoyance at times. And this door goes a long way to eliminating that. And then if it's really windy, sometimes it can blow it open, but if it starts doing that, you can just zip it like a quarter way and it holds it closed. So that's really handy. The ventilation in the tent is also great. All kinds of windows. If it's really hot out, you can stay plenty cool. And then if it's raining or you need privacy, these curtains right here above the screen fold down, and you have plenty of room to do whatever you need to do in there. So I think that covers most of the things about the tent. You know, the price is good. It'll keep you pretty dry. If you make modifications to this screened-in tent, you can really get more use out of the tent. But it takes a long time to set up. The little pins on the poles are kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. If it does get wet, I mean, folding it up and getting into the bag. Actually, let me show you the bag that it came in. So I know that can be kind of a pain in the butt for people. You have to excuse my yard. We've been doing more camping than yard maintenance this year. So after a while, if you're like us, these things start to tear. I think the other side is even worse. So yeah, you'll see I have a lot of, it's torn. I have a lot of duct tape kind of trying to hold it together. We still are using the original bag though, and if it's dry and you're not, you know, once I get this dried out, I'll roll it up really tight and it will fit in to the bag, but it takes a while to get the hang of getting it just right to get in there. So, you know, usually you're not going to be camping by yourself. If you have a person to help you set this up, I would say typically it would take about 1.5 people to set up. You know, you just need a little help here and there, and it will speed the process along quite a bit. So usually you're not going to be using this by yourself. You'll have an extra person. But if you have young kids, you know, a lot of times one parent has to watch the kids, you know, and the other, so they don't get run over by a car or eaten by a bear or whatever. So the other parent gets the duty of setting up the tent and doing the other things. And that, at least that's how it was when our kids were younger. So yeah, it's doable with one person, but it takes a while. Durability is one thing I didn't talk about. I rate this like, you know, 10 out of 10 in terms of durability. Really, we've used this tent dozens and dozens of times in all kinds of weather, and it's dirty right now because we just had it out in mud and storm and stuff. But I mean, hardly, maybe a pinhole or two on the sides where a ash from a fire hit it or something. But I mean, in terms of the quality of the build, it's pretty solid. Now, they do make an elite version of this. My friend has one, and it has a floor here in the screened-in part of the tent. You know, that might be kind of nice depending on where you're setting it up. I don't know that it's worth the extra money. They didn't seem to think like theirs was way better than ours when we had them stacked up next to each other. I think the interior dimensions are slightly different. I think theirs might be a little fatter and less long or something like that. I forget. But if you're considering whether you should pay up for the elite version, I don't think there's any reason to. I think this is probably, in, you know, 98% of the situations you're going to be in, going to be just as good for less money. So I'll put a link down in the comment section to Amazon. The last time I checked, they were $202. As long as you don't mind hauling around a big tent and you got plenty of room to put it in your car, and you're going to basically go and camp somewhere for several days. We have another setup that we use that I just did a review on, and we toured a bunch of parks in the northwest of the United States, of the national parks, and we took a smaller tent that because we had to put it up and take it down every night, and this one was just too big and bulky to deal with doing that. The footprint is pretty big, so you want to consider that too. If you go to, usually when we take this tent, we're going to pretty big open state campgrounds where the tent spots are pretty big. I've been to some camping areas where, you know, they were designed back in the day where they didn't make these gigantic tents. So they're designed for like 4-person tents. And there's not a lot of wiggle room if it's surrounded by trees and it's surrounded by hedges or whatever. You might not be able to fit this tent in some spots. So it's a pretty big footprint. If you know you're going to take a big trip, maybe look at the dimensions of some of those campgrounds. If you go to some place like Yellowstone, they even ask you how big is your tent, and you might have to pay a little extra for a bigger spot to put a tent like this. So, but yeah, give it a shot if you're looking for a big old tent for your whole family. It's pretty comfortable and gets through storms well. All right, thanks for watching Team Kramer Fishing. We do a lot of camping and fishing videos. Check out our channel if you like to see families catching fish and camping and doing lots of outdoor trips and travel and things like that. Later.